The mist hung thick and heavy over the masts of the Harbinger as the ship approached the island of lost winds. Captain Rourke stood at the helm, his eyes narrowed against the swirling grey haze that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The air was different here, charged with an electric sorrow that prickled at the skin and whispered, secrets in tongues only the lost could understand. Alara, the ship's navigator, leaned over a brass compass that spun erratically, its needle swinging wildly as if caught in the throes of an unseen tempest. "These winds," she muttered, voice low and tight, "they're not natural. They carry voices. Lost souls." Perhaps Rourke's jaw tightened. The legends had always spoken of this island as a place where the veil between the living and the dead thinned. A place where the winds themselves carried the memories and regrets of those who had perished in the haunted sea below. Yet nothing in the tales had prepared him for the oppressive weight that now settled over the Harbinger. The crew moved with a cautious reverence, their usual banter stilled by the eerie silence that surrounded them. Jocks, the ship's engineer, was the first to break the hush, his voice rough with disbelief. "This is nonsense. Ghosts don't ride the wind." But as the Harbinger's engines sputtered and coughed, struggling against the invisible currents, even his skepticism wavered. Sparks flew from the engine room, and the steady hum of the ship's propellers faltered, as if the very breath of the island sought to sap their strength. Myra, the enigmatic passenger, stood apart from the rest, her hooded figure barely moving as if she were part of the mist itself. When she spoke, her voice was a whisper carried on the breeze. "The island tests us all, not just our bodies, but our spirits." The first trial came swiftly, as the Harbinger rounded a bend in the floating landmass. Ghostly figures emerged from the fog, translucent sailors, their faces twisted in silent anguish, reaching out with hands that seemed to pass through solid air. The crew froze, hearts pounding as the ethereal forms circled the ship, their mournful wails a haunting symphony that echoed in the minds of all aboard. Rourke gripped the railing, struggling to steady his breath. "Hold fast," he commanded, voice firm despite the chill crawling up his spine. "They're the lost. We honor them by pressing on." Ilara nodded, eyes shining with grim determination. "We can't let their despair undo us." But the island's curse was relentless. Whispers slithered through the rigging, planting seeds of doubt and fear. Old regrets surfaced like specters in the night. Rourke's reckless decisions, Ilara's failures to save those she once guided. Jox's doubts that he was more a liability than an asset. Even Myra's cryptic silence seemed to fracture under the weight of the island's sorrow. The Harbinger's crew found themselves tested beyond the physical realm. Night after night, the winds carried visions, moments from their pasts, twisted into nightmares, accusing and unforgiving. Trust frayed at the edges as the curse sought to unravel the fragile bonds they had forged. Yet it was in these darkest hours that Rourke's leadership truly shone. Gathering the crew in the cramped galley, his voice was steady and resolute. "We carry a burden none chose, but together we can bear it. This helm may doom us, but it will not break us." Mira stepped forward, revealing shards of the helm's tortured history, how it had doomed entire fleets, how its curse fed on fear and division. Yet she spoke also of hope, of a path through the storm, if only they could hold fast to one another. The dawn broke over the island like a fragile promise. The winds, once howling with spectral voices, softened to a mournful sigh. The Harbinger's engines roared back to life, and the crew, though weary and scarred, stood united. As they set sail from the island of lost winds, the ghosts of the past seemed to recede, but their lessons lingered. Rourke knew the journey ahead would demand more than courage. It would require sacrifice, trust, and an unyielding will to defy the curse that shadowed the ghost helm. Yet beneath the weight of the lost souls and the whispering winds, a single truth held firm. Redemption was still within reach, if only the crew could weather the storm together. The Harbinger cut through the mist, sails full and spirits steeled, but the island's lingering chill in their bones was a reminder the winds of fate were ever unpredictable, and the cost of failure was a price none dared to pay again. And so they sailed onward into the unknown, where the next trial awaited just beyond the horizon, and the true test of their resolve was yet to come. The cramped mess hall felt smaller than ever as voices rose in a cacophony of suspicion and fear. Lantern light flickered against the wooden walls, casting long, jittery shadows that danced across faces etched with worry. Captain Rourke stood at the center, his eyes sharp beneath a furrowed brow, listening to the heated exchange. The accusation that lingered unspoken was like a poison in the air. There was a traitor among them. Alara slammed a fist onto the rough-hewn table, her sharp voice cutting through the din. Sabotage isn't an accident. Someone's been tampering with the engine. We're lucky the Harbinger's still in one piece. Her gaze swept over the crew, lingering on Joran, the burly man who shifted uneasily in the corner. Finn's restless eyes darted from face to face, his voice low and tense. If the Helm's curse doesn't finish us, treachery might. We can't afford to unravel now. Rourke's mind churned. The mission was already burdened with peril, the cursed ghost helm weighing heavily on their fate. Now, internal betrayal threatened to tear them apart before they could even face the dangers of the skies. Later, beneath the cloak of night, Rourke sought out Joran near the ship's edge. The cold wind whipped around them, carrying the salt temps of the haunted sea below. Stars hid behind heavy clouds, leaving darkness to swallow their confrontation. Why, Joran? What's the price of your betrayal? Rourke's voice was grave, but steady. Joran's scarred face twisted with desperation and remorse. They promised me safety. Coin, a place where the curse won't follow. I didn't want to hurt the crew, only to save myself. The confession hit Rourke like a gale, but he held firm. Your selfishness endangers us all. This ends here. Meanwhile, in the engine room, Alara worked frantically, sweat mingling with grime on her brow. The rhythmic clang of metal echoed as she repaired the damage Joran's sabotage had wrought. Her hands moved with practiced urgency, fighting against time and treachery. By dawn, the crew gathered on deck. The pale light cast long shadows as Rourke addressed them, his voice carrying over the restless murmurs. Betrayal has scarred us, but it will not define us. We stand together, or we fall divided. The skies ahead are perilous, but our resolve must be stronger. Trust is fragile, but it is the only thing that will carry us through. The crew exchanged uncertain glances, but beneath their fear, a spark of hope kindled. They had faced darkness, both from within and without, and now, with trust tentatively rebuilt, the Harbinger sailed forward into the unknown, carrying with it the weight of a cursed legacy and the fragile promise of redemption. Yet, even as the ship cut through the airborne currents, a shadow lingered, whispers of further secrets and unseen dangers that threatened to unravel the fragile peace they had fought to restore. Rourke's gaze hardened, knowing that the battle for their survival was far from over. The night wind carried a silent warning, and the skies awaited their next move. The sky above was a sullen canvas of grey, with clouds that seemed to press down upon the Harbinger as it glided into the ominous expanse known among sky sailors as the skyship graveyard. A vast field of wrecked vessels stretched beneath them. The skeletal remains of once proud skyships, twisted and broken like the bones of some great ancient leviathan. Captain Rourke stood at the helm, the wind tugging at his coat, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the horizon. The air was heavy, thick with the scent of rusted metal and decayed wood, mingled with an intangible chill that whispered of death and despair. Lyra Voss was crouched near the ship's rail, her keen eyes surveying the wreckage below. She pointed out a hole pierced with strange, jagged tears, its sails shredded and flapping like the tattered wings of a dying bird. "This place," she muttered, voice low and grim, "it's a tomb. Every one of these ships met their end here, and not by accident." Marek Thorne, the navigator, stared down at his charts, his fingers trembling as he traced the perilous path the Harbinger must take. The currents here were treacherous, twisted by unseen forces, and the ghosts of those who had perished seemed to linger in the shifting mists. "The winds don't just blow," he said, voice tight. "They hunt." The crew moved with cautious purpose, their faces taut with tension. Celine, the mysterious passenger, remained cloaked at the ship's stern, her eyes reflecting the haunted expanse below. No one dared to approach her as the shadows lengthened. Suddenly, Lyra called out, "Captain!" "Over here." Rourke hurried to her side, peering down at a half-buried helm wedged among the wreckage. The metal was cold and etched with the same eerie symbols as the ghost helm they carried. A chill ran down Rourke's spine as he recognized the cursed artifact, tarnished with age and encrusted with salt. "This was one of them," Rourke whispered, his voice thick with dread. One of the doomed. From this grim discovery, the weight of the mission pressed heavier upon the crew. Mechanical failures began to plague the Harbinger. The engines sputtered, and strange noises echoed through the hold. Lyra worked furiously, her hands steady despite the growing unease. Night fell, and spectral figures flickered at the edge of vision. Whispered voices drifted on the wind, tales of lost souls doomed by the helm's curse. Rourke felt their gaze, cold and accusing, yet he stood firm. "We will not be the next," he vowed, gripping the wheel tighter. "We carry their legacy, but we will chart a new course." The crew gathered in the dimly lit cabin, sharing stories of the past victims who had borne the helm, their voices hushed yet filled with resolve. The truth was clear. The ghost helm was no mere legend, but a harbinger of doom that had claimed many before them. As the Harbinger pushed forward through the graveyard, every creak and groan of the ship echoed like a heartbeat in the silence. The night held its breath, waiting to see if this crew would succumb to the curse or defy the fates that had bound so many before. The sky churned with fury, dark clouds swirling like an angry sea above the submerged islands. The wind roaring with a voice that seemed to tear at the very fabric of the Harbinger's sails. Captain Rourke gripped the helm with white-knuckled determination, his coat flapping violently in the tempestuous gale. Rain lashed his weather-beaten face, stinging like 1,000 needles, but his gaze did not waver from the roiling horizon. Around him, the crew fought to keep the battered ship steady, shouting commands over the cacophony of wind and thunder. Myra, the ship's engineer, crouched near the engine room hatch, her hands working feverishly to reinforce the failing mechanisms that strained under the relentless assault. "These currents, they've never been this violent," she yelled, voice sharp with urgency. "The helm's curse is tightening its grip. If we don't find a way through, the Harbinger won't last the night." Rourke's eyes flickered with grim resolve. The ghost helm, resting in its guarded chamber, pulsed faintly with an otherworldly light, as if feeding off the storm's wrath. He knew that conventional navigation was no longer enough. They needed help beyond mortal skill. The very winds that threatened to tear them apart must become their allies. As the Harbinger pitched and shuddered, Rourke made his decision. Retreat was impossible. The cursed voyage must press on. He descended below deck to the ship's cabin, where the air grew thick with tension and whispered fears. The lanterns cast flickering shadows on the wood-paneled walls, and the helm itself seemed to throb with a sinister pulse. Closing his eyes, Rourke reached out with a silent plea, summoning the ancient forces that governed the airborne currents. The cabin grew icy cold, and a faint breeze stirred the curtains despite the sealed windows. Then, as if answering his summons, the wind spirits manifested, swirling eddies of shimmering blue and silver light, their forms ephemeral and shifting like smoke caught in a gale. A voice, both melodic and haunting, whispered through the room. "Why do you call mortal? The skies are no place for weakness or folly." Rourke met the spirit's gaze, or what passed for eyes in their swirling forms. "I seek passage through the tempest," he declared, voice steady though his heart raced. "My ship carries a burden cursed and heavy. Without your aid, we will perish in the storm. Help us, and I will offer what you desire in return." The spirits twisted and danced, their whispers rising in an eerie chorus. "A pact must be forged, Captain. The skies demand balance. What will you give to sway the winds?" Rourke hesitated only briefly before answering. "I offer the promise of respect and passage through the endless currents, and a share in the fate of the Helm's curse." His words hung in the air, weighty and irrevocable. The cabin filled with a sudden gust of wind, swirling papers and extinguishing candles. The spirits' forms glowed brighter, their voices melding into a solemn chant. "So be it. The winds shall carry you through the perilous paths, but beware, the bond you forge tightens the helm's hold." Emerging back onto the deck, Rourke found the sky transformed. The violent gale had softened to a gentle breeze, the dark clouds parting to reveal glimpses of starlight. The Harbinger glided smoothly through the once turbulent currents, the air alive with a strange, almost sacred calm. Yet beneath the relief, a chilling sense of foreboding settled over the crew. Mira approached Rourke quietly, her brow furrowed. "Captain, something's wrong. The ship vibrates differently, and the helm, it hums with a deeper power. This pact is a double-edged sword." Rourke nodded grimly, feeling the weight of the bargain. The winds now carried them safely, but at a cost not yet fully revealed. As the Harbinger sailed onward, the shadows of the curse crept ever closer, and the true price of their alliance awaited in the skies ahead. The night deepened, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the elemental forces watched, patient and unyielding. The pact was made, but the story of the ghost helm was far from over. And as the Harbinger cut through the calm air, a faint whisper echoed on the Windan omen, and a promise that the skies held secrets darker than any storm could unleash. The morning light crept slowly over the horizon, spilling gold and pale pink hues across the endless expanse of airborne currents that cradled the skyship Harbinger. The ship's timbers creaked softly as the gentle swell of the currents shifted beneath her, a living breath holding them aloft between the submerged islands. On the upper deck, Captain Rourke stood alone, the weight of his past pressing on his broad shoulders like the heavy coat he wore. His eyes, sharp and grey, scanned the horizon with a mixture of regret and resolve. "I was a fool," he began, voice roughened by years of unspoken remorse. "The sea breaker was my command, my pride, but one reckless decision shattered it all. A storm caught me unprepared, and men died because I failed to heed the warnings." The deck beneath him groaned as if in reply, the distant cries of seabirds mingling with the whispering wind. The crew gathered nearby, drawn by his confession, their faces a mixture of sympathy and guarded judgment. Among them, Myra, the navigator, shifted uneasily, her sharp green eyes flickering with a pain she kept closely guarded. Later, in the cramped navigator's quarters, Myra unfolded a worn chart, edges frayed and stained from years of use. Her fingers trembled slightly as she traced the lines marking the treacherous currents they would soon face. "I was responsible," she admitted quietly, voice barely above the rustle of parchment. "A miscalculation that cost lives. The currents shifted unexpectedly, and I led the crew into danger. Since then, I've carried that guilt like a shadow." The room was dim, the flickering lantern casting long shadows on the walls, the distant thunder of the haunted sea serving as a grim reminder of the forces they defied. Her confession hung heavy in the stale air, a secret shared only with the ghosts of the past. Down below, in the engine room, Joss wiped soot and sweat from her brow, her hands steady despite the grime. The hiss of steam and clank of metal filled the space, punctuating her sharp words as she confronted the legend of the ghost helm. "I don't believe in curses," she snapped, voice edged with frustration. "Superstition has no place in the workings of this ship." "But," she paused, eyes narrowing, "I can't deny the strange things that have happened since we took on that cursed cargo." Her skepticism was a shield, a defiant stand against the growing unease that crept among the crew. Yet beneath the sharp tongue lay a heart burdened by past failures and a fierce loyalty to the Harbinger and its mission. In the shadowed cabin, Silas sat motionless, the flickering candlelight casting eerie shapes on the walls. His icy blue eyes reflected secrets as old as the submerged world itself. Finally, breaking the heavy silence, he spoke in measured tones. "The ghost helm is not merely a curse," he said, his voice a whisper carried on the cold wind that moaned through the rigging. "It is a legacy one that has bound my fate and the fate of many before us. I have seen what it can do, and I have felt its pull." His cryptic revelations unsettled the crew, stirring questions that none dared to voice aloud. The helm's dark history was no longer a distant tale, but a living force entwined with their own destinies. As the day wore on, the intertwined stories of the crew unfolded like the currents beneath them, complex, unpredictable, and deeply connected. Trust was forged in shared pain, yet the shadows of their pasts threatened to unravel fragile bonds. The ghost helm's curse was no longer a legend whispered in fear. It was a burden they all carried, binding them together in a fate neither could escape. The Harbinger sailed onward, the echoes of the past swirling around her like the mists that clung to the submerged islands. Each revelation deepened the mystery and the stakes, drawing the crew closer to the edge of a destiny shaped by curses, sacrifices, and the desperate hope for redemption. As twilight descended, casting long shadows across the deck, Rourke gazed at the helm resting ominously in the captain's quarters. The weight of history pressed down, but within him stirred a renewed determination. The journey ahead was fraught with peril, but for the first time in many moons, the captain felt the flicker of something he had thought lost forever, hope. And as the stars blinked awake in the vast, endless sky above, the Harbinger sailed onward, carrying not just a cursed artifact, but the intertwined fates of those who dared to defy it. Yet, in the quiet moments between the shifting winds and turbulent currents, one question lingered like a spectre. Could the echoes of their past truly prepare them for the darkness still to come? Or would the ghost helm claim them all in its relentless grip? The answer waited beyond the horizon, where the submerged world whispered secrets only the brave or the damned would ever know.